This is Center Stage, putting lawyers in the spotlight by highlighting attorneys and other industry experts to help take your law firm to the next level. Hey everyone, and welcome to Center Stage. I'm your host, John Henson, and this week we're going to be talking about keeping your employees engaged. This year, especially, we've seen all kinds of stories in the news about how people all over the country are quitting their jobs. They're looking for something else, whether they think they're just unhappy, they think they're not getting paid enough, they think it's just a bad work environment, whatever the reason is. But one of the most common things that I've been kind of hearing through all of this is that it goes something like people don't leave bad jobs, they leave bad managers. And this week, we're going to kind of go down that path a little bit. We're going to kind of talk about some of the things that you can do to be a better leader for the employees in your firm, to do things that maybe you're making a better work environment, a more engaged work environment, and stuff like that. And so to help me do that, I am joined by coach and consultant Molly McGrath from Hiring and Empowering Solutions. Molly, thank you so much for joining us this week.
Oh, John, thank you for having me. I'm honored. I'm really excited. This is going to be fun, and I'm excited with the value that we're going to leave for your listeners.
Yeah, absolutely. So before we jump in, who is Molly McGrath and what all does she bring to the table here?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. So I've been serving in the legal space since 2008. We started Hiring and Empowering Solutions. And if y'all remember 2008, those were some tough times as well. And by and large, our organization has two sides of it. As you said, consulting. We're really, really passionate about getting the employee and the entrepreneur, i.e. lawyers, is who we serve. 100%. We only work with small solo law firms, really passionate about being close to the heartbeat of the business. So we can make decisions, we can take action, and there's no bottlenecks, which has been my experience with big firms. So I'm passionate about the small, medium, solo firms and getting the employee and the entrepreneur on the same playing field. So one side of our practice, we have our Team Empowerment Academy in addition to our 66-day law firm turnaround. The other side of it is hiring, where we do flat fee retained search and staffing, which if you could imagine right now is absolute insanity. It's an employee's market. And we staff anywhere from receptionist to an exit strategy for an associate attorney to take over the firm.
Wow. Awesome. So let's jump in here. And one of the first questions I have for you, I really like, kind of the first direction that we're going here, because one of our core values here that we have internally at Spotlight Branding is take action, and it's all about how, we work towards finding solutions. We're not making excuses and stuff like that. And, look, I'm not going to say that we accomplish that goal 100% of the time, but it's definitely a focus of emphasis for us. But that's, I think, one of the biggest issues that a lot of business owners and a lot of law firm owners face with their employees is just dealing with people who are just making a bunch of excuses all the time for why something doesn't work or why they can't do something or whatever. So what are some things that lawyers who are owning their own firm, what can they do to help try to reduce and eliminate those excuses that their employees are making all the time?
I love your core value of take action. And if anything, I really want the attorneys to listen up in regards to and consider adopting that core value. Our first of our core values is brutal honesty. And so for as far as employees that come up with excuses and reasons and not getting them to take action, I actually wrote a book called Entrepreneurs in Entrepreneurs World, How to Get Your Employees to Step Up and Lead. And that book kicks off with, so go the coach, so go the coachee. So if you have employees that are not taking action or constantly having excuses, you have to start with looking at yourself as a leader. Are you building a culture that is built on taking action, follow through, not ditching meetings, not being a bottleneck within the process? Because in my experience, the employees that I interview and I say to them, well, tell me why you're looking for a new job. What's up? And they'll say, well, they're always universally, the answer is, well, I'm looking for more opportunity. And when I really peel away the layers of the onion around that, it really comes down to that they're working in a law firm where the attorney doesn't make decisions. They are indecisive. They're not a firm that takes action. And because attorneys, by and large, are they are very much trained skeptics. They all know that. That's what they tell me. They're highly, highly analytical, top intellect in any profession whatsoever. They are trained to look for issue spotting constantly. So that is a blessing and a curse, because a lot of times it deters them from making decisions. So step one, I would say, is take a look at you. Are you the role model where you, as a business owner, as an entrepreneur, whether you're the professional law firm administrator, COO, CEO, whatever seat you sit in, are you making decisions? Are you taking action? And have you built a culture that communicates that we do take action, we follow through? And have you empowered your employees to not only have the responsibility to do whatever their job duty is, and if you're facing that they're not moving fast enough, they're not making decisions or delegating back up, whatever it is, look really truly if you've given them not only the responsibility, but also the permission and the authority to move files, to move things forward, and have you empowered them to make decisions? Because one of our second core values is you will never, ever get fired for making the wrong decision, but you will absolutely get fired by making no decision.
Yeah, no, that's great. Side note, are you familiar with the Colby assessment?
Oh, I live and breathe by the Colby. That's why it's a fact finder.
Yeah. So we did that over here at our office. And I'm not the business owner, but we all took it. I ended up as a high fact finder, and so for those not familiar, there's 4 different sort of, I guess scores that you get with your overall assessment. And the first one is either fact finder or quick start. And so if you're a high fact finder, you're a little bit more deliberate. You kind of wait, you look, you try to get as many answers as you can. I feel like most lawyers probably tend to fall on that side of things.
Yes.
And so one of the critiques and what might be seen as some of a negative, and you kind of hit on it a little bit, is that you take a lot more time to make decisions, and the decision-making process seems to be a little bit more slowed down versus a quick start, who they just tend to jump right into things and they just go. And
they need chaos constantly.
Yeah. And so I'm glad that you're familiar with the Colby assessment and kind of familiar with that terminology. And so that just hit me as like, that's probably a big thing there. And so, if you're out there and you're familiar with that Colby, or if you're one of those more deliberate decision makers, that's one of the things you really have to keep in mind is people have got to keep moving forward. And so you can't just always hang back and try to think through every possible thing. You got to make those decisions and keep pushing forward. So on the other side of that, though, it's looking inward, like you said, and figuring out what you can do. But what can a business owner do to empower their employees, in almost any aspect, whether it's, them making decisions on their own or, trying to change a perspective or anything like that? What can a business owner do on their end to empower their employees?
Yeah, great question. And actually, you had a phenomenal lead in that with the Colby. I would say number one is invest. I think it's $49.99. You want to take the Colby A as an Apple assessment. And as John alluded to, it takes 25 minutes to figure it out. And honestly, for any of your guests, I would be more than happy to facilitate a free consultation to go through those assessments with them, because I've been using it for 28 years now. It's the cheapest, easiest, quickest, most efficient way. So the way to empower your employees is really understand their Colby, their DNA, how they're wired, how they like to give and receive information, and everybody else on your team. That cuts down that's a game changer right there. And I would say is first and foremost. Is second, to empower them to make decisions. Now, you own a law firm, right? When I hire employees, they're equally paralyzed, because attorneys, what's been pounded in your head your whole life? Malpractice. And attorney or employees coming into a law firm, they're riddled with fear. to make decisions because they're afraid. It's a law firm. What if I really screw up? There could be massive implications to this. So you have to remember and just shift it a little bit that they're not giving legal advice. They're not, unless they're in an associate attorney position, and there's a fine line with paralegals, and that's very different of onboarding and training. But to empower your employees, when you set up your ground rules, when you have your core values and you have your Colby, you have safety nets in place. What will help you so much is having a weekly team meeting where everybody's there, ran by an agenda, where you can really facilitate it. I don't even call it team meetings. I call it a board of directors meeting. It changes the tonality of it. People don't show up sloppy and unprepared. Everybody's really clear of how they show up, and then doing a daily huddle. So you can be really clear on, okay, what were your top 3 from yesterday? Here's the decisions I made. Here's what I did. I called back Mrs. Smith, what have you. And then in real time, you can course correct. So if somebody did make a mistake, they shouldn't have called the client first. They should have called the financial advisor, or whatever it is. It's okay. You can turn it around in 24 hours. And again, you treat that team huddle like a locker room huddle before you're going on the playing field. And I'm going to get tons of pushback from your attorneys. I can't tell you how often when people come to me, they're like, my team's a disaster, cash flows in the toilet, nobody's doing their job, we're not moving files, whatever it is. My number one question is, are you having weekly team meetings that are non-negotiable, unwavering, same place, same time, every single week? They're like, we're too busy for that. Well, you're not too busy to have 14 separate come to Jesus meetings with everyone on your team, or to have communication ping pong and send 72 emails back and forth when you have your version of what the next step is. That person has, it's a disaster. So you do have the time. You're just choosing not to really facilitate it and be very intentional with it. Yeah. So that's a great way to empower your employees, because every day you have a very quick check-in. And again, on the employee side, I'm constantly pounding into them. You have to show up prepared. You have to show up professional. You have to show up with proposed solutions versus constant problem. Otherwise, your attorney's going to ditch a meeting because they don't want to show up where everyone's looking at them to facilitate it. In fact, the attorney shouldn't facilitate it. They should just show up as the mentor, the coach, the leader to give direction, and that's it. But people should not be delegating back up. Otherwise, you're going to lose your attorney's interest. This should be a meeting that everybody's excited about because they get direction and feedback. And honestly, you have to remember, you're hiring humans. Humans need time, attention, and feedback, and they will never leave you. And they will always thrive and soar when they get that. And that's the most missing piece in most law firms, because attorneys have a story in their head. I read a quote by Warren Buffett. I was on another podcast and I love this. The interviewer said, I love the quote by Warren Buffett where he says, busy is the new stupid. And it's true. How many attorneys always say they're busy? It's a cop-out.
Yeah, for sure. And to your point, the meetings, I think it does a good job of also just making sure that everyone's on the same page and there's communication, especially maybe if you're, the way you have your firm set up, you have different departments or whatever, and maybe some people don't communicate with others as often, making sure you're getting in those huddles and just making sure that everyone knows where everyone's at. And there's a little bit of accountability there and just a good way to just kind of slowly build up a good team atmosphere. The other part of that, though, that I like that you talk about is we don't just want our employees to just kind of stagnate. We want to try to help them grow. And what can a business owner do to help their employees kind of grow along and potentially become leaders in the office one day?
It's so simple, but it's really hard for attorneys to wrap their brains around. It starts with what I just said, like the time and attention. If you give them that, they will not leave you, and they actually will always grow. I would say, that weekly stakeholders meeting, that board of directors, a daily huddle that is very, very quick, no more than 30 minutes. People can be driving into the office, what have you, and then quarterly. Now, here's the deal. everybody hates an employee review because you think your head's on the chopping block as the employee, and the attorney's like, oh, great. Now they're going to be asking me for a raise. Do I give them a raise? Did they earn the raise? It's just, it's a quagmire. It's a vicious cycle, and everybody's anxious about it and not happy about it. I really transform that into an employee growth plan. If you have your employees, and again, I'd be happy to share my process if anyone emails me at the end, put it on your calendar from the day they get hired quarterly that you're doing employee growth plans. And my process is you have the employee do a self-evaluation, and then there's a whole process of what they believe their top 3 goals are, what they've brought to the firm this year, or this quarter, where they're at, where they want to be a quarter from now, what ideas. They're all this different excavating questions that you ask from them, because you don't know, you're in the conference room all the time. The greatest employee in your practice is the person at the front line, your client service coordinator. They're the ones that are doing inbound and outbound calls. So they see so much stuff that people don't see. And so often that's the position that gets the least amount of attention. And they're a sitting gold mine. They're the ones with your marketing messages, because they're hearing the voice of the customer. I could go on for hours about that position alone. But then you come together. They've done a self-evaluation, you've done an evaluation, and then you come together, and now it's a coaching session where you're really talking about, wow, you really want to step up and move into the marketing director? I had no idea. That's fantastic. And they're like just rattling off all the stuff they're seeing at the front of the house, at the front desk, and what have you, and your mind's blown. So when you have these hardwired, your employees know about it, and then there's also an incentive-based compensation plan that is team focused. When you do your quarterly planning and strategic retreats, and you come out with your top 4 power projects, and everybody's really clear, we're going to review these every week in our weekly stakeholders meeting, our board of directors meeting. And then that's needle moving work. We're just chipping away at it every single week. And then if we reach it, we all have a team centric goal. And that works absolutely beautifully. And my favorite thing is when I email paralegals, legal assistants, attorneys, and my subject line for recruiting is, are you happy and being treated well? ? And I love it when people reply to that, and they won't even talk to me as a recruiter, because they're like, no way, Jose, I love my firm. And I go and I look at the website, and I'll go as far as send the managing attorney and be like, whatever you are doing, 10x it, because your employees won't even talk to me. They will never leave your firm.
Yeah, no, that's great. And I mean, like, your process sounds very similar to what we do here in our office. We run, it's basically I don't know, a framework, I guess, called EOS. I don't know if you're familiar with that.
Oh, yes. I love it.
And so it's very similar to kind of what you talked about. And so instead of having those traditional like performance reviews, it's called a quarterly conversation.
Yep.
And, to that point, the manager and the employees, they each have their own separate evaluation, and then they come together in a meeting and they talk about it, and it's a conversation. And so it's that there's not that stigma of, calling it a review and anyone being nervous going into it. It's just going to be a conversation. You're covering, if you get it, you want it, and you have the capacity to do your job, and what you did last quarter, what you're hoping to do this quarter. And so all those things do a really good job. And another point that you were making, I think also just in solo and small firms, or in a small business like ours, I think having those, handful of employees, if you're doing it like this, and you're engaging with your employees and making sure that that communication's open, it really allows people to feel like they have a fingerprint on the direction that the business is going. And it really helps them feel like that they're doing more than just showing up from 9 to 5 and slapping on a keyboard all day. They feel like they have some power and some influence on helping the business grow. Maybe the goal is to be the biggest law firm in your county. And, instead of someone who's working at a giant corporation sitting in a cubicle all day, they feel like they can come into the office and they're actually working towards something.
Absolutely. People want to be part of something. And if COVID hasn't taught us anything, and it actually existed before that, but it's just in stereo right now of people realizing when they got forced to go work from home or what have you, or have a hybrid model, things of that nature. We've seen all the studies of how people are working so much harder than they ever did in a cubicle or an office environment, what have you. But so often that's why my business model is based on being connected to the heartbeat of the business. Employees want that. And it's so simple when you adopt the EOS model. You have rocks meeting, you have all of it. I mean, it costs you nothing to do that and to implement that. It's time and connection, and people will not leave you. And during COVID, when people went back home or they're hybrid and now they're going back into the office or whatever it is, who didn't on this planet take stock of their life and what's important? Who didn't start to look at where they're investing their time and what have you? If not, that shined a big flashlight on that. And every single person started with, where did they spend the most time? Where do they spend their most waking hours? At their job.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. So kind of going now towards the back end of this conversation, kind of towards more of a more unfortunate circumstance, you have these employees who are unhappy. You're doing everything you can to make them feel empowered, to encourage them to take action rather than to make excuses. But in the end, whether you have to fire them or they decide, that they're just not going to change, how do you go about letting someone go?
Attorneys are notoriously horrible. It's fascinating to me. I'll just say this comment real quick. So often when I get phone calls, I probably had 3 of them this week. I'm like, we just had this conversation 2 weeks ago. They're still there. You didn't fire them. And they're like, well, I'm like, you're litigate in a courtroom and you can't fire an employee. It's amazing. But it's because they do, care about people, and especially the people they employ. But how you do it is you do it fast and you don't over justify it and you don't get deep into the story, because if you have these quarterly employee reviews, it will never come as a shock to someone. So that actually helps you tremendously when it comes time to make the decision of when you need to let someone go. And there's something that happens, John. It's amazing. You're getting ready. You finally muster up the courage. You're getting ready to let go of the employee. And what does the employee do every single time? They show up and perform. They're like, oh, maybe I was crazy. I was just getting ready to fire her. And now she just closed a client. Dang it. I can't fire her now, but that has no lasting power at all. So you trick yourself. I say, do it quick and just sit down and have a conversation, and you can anchor to the stuff in the employee reviews. And honestly, if you don't have that implemented right now, you don't over justify it. You just let them know. You do whatever, in my experience, depending on the employee, you don't turn it into a coaching conversation and try to change them, because you have probably already tried to do that numerous times when you had your sit down meetings. So as much as you could keep it very emotionally uncharged, even if the reason is a lot of personal stuff, don't go into because you're always late, because you don't dress professionally. No, don't go into that. Just keep it very simple. It should be a 5-minute conversation. Get the keys, have them sign the letter, do whatever you need to do. If there's a severance package, what have you. Some of them, depending on the human, it might be, it's not working out where you don't have enough, whatever it is, they might stay if they're, it's person by person, what have you. But it's never a surprise to them if you have employee reviews, if you have weekly meetings. And going back to your previous conversation where you said, yeah, the daily huddles bring a little bit of accountability. No, it brings a lot of accountability. In fact, that's the whole reason for that is people know they need to show up at 9:00 tomorrow and report. And so when you hear that Susie constantly has excuses, tries to hijack the meeting, what have you, and she does it 5 days in a row, it's time to let her go. Make it simple, make it fast, and don't go into the weeds of over justification in the details.
Yeah. So the last question I'll have for you before we wrap up here, and I think I know your answer on this already. One of the common phrases that I heard in one of my past roles as HR person here, was slow to hire, quick to fire. How do you feel about that statement?
I agree 100%. 100%. We hold on to people way longer than we should have. And, usually when you have a solid hiring process, and so I would say if you find yourself in that place where you feel like, oh, here we go again, I don't want to hire someone because I don't want to go back into the hiring process. If you find yourself with a revolving door, which a lot of firms tell me, either them quitting or you firing them, take a moment and pause and go back and look at your hiring process because you really could eliminate that. But I'm in full agreement of that.
Yeah. And if anyone's interested, we had an episode about this a few weeks ago with Allison Williams talking about our hiring process. And so a lot of tips and tricks that you can use to make that a lot more efficient. And so definitely encourage you to go check that out. Those are all the questions I have specifically for you, but everyone knows that I do have one final question that we ask every guest here. And that is, if you had one piece of advice for our lawyers out there, what would it be?
Stay in action, get in action, and don't stop. That would absolutely, especially for lawyers, I would say, just make decisions quick. As you said, be quick start, or the fact finders. One of the things that Colby that has for fact finders is it's time to abandon the project and empower your team and give them permission to say that to you. We have enough information. We have enough data. It's time to get in action.
Yeah. And I just thought of like a quote. I think it was Thomas Edison. And the quote was something like, I haven't failed 100 times. I've just found 100 different ways that didn't work. And so, it's making that decision. If it doesn't work out, that's okay. Yeah. It's not the end of the world. You can go back, course correct, and keep pushing forward. And so all that good stuff, as always, I really appreciate you taking some time to talk with us this week. Thank you, everyone, for continuing to listen. Continue to leave us some reviews on Apple Podcasts, rate and review on Spotify, Pandora, YouTube, wherever you're watching the show. And that's going to do it for this week. Molly, thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks for listening. To learn more, go to spotlightbranding.com/centerstage.